Alma dragged herself home to Kumasi after a long day of lectures, hoping only for some rest. But when she opened her bedroom door, her heart stopped. The room was empty. Her clothes were gone, her laptop was missing, even the small savings box she had carefully hidden had vanished. Worst of all, the necklace from her late grandmother, the one thing she treasured most, was nowhere to be found. She stood frozen, staring at the bare space where her life used to be. Then her eyes caught her younger sister, Efua, leaning casually against the doorway, sipping a bottle of soda as if nothing unusual had happened. There was no sign of guilt on her face, only a smug smile, like she had won something. Alma's voice trembled as she asked what happened, but Efua only shrugged. "You're not using those things anyway," she said coldly. "I needed money for my trip to Accra. Mom said you'd understand." The words cut deeper than the theft itself. It wasn't just the stolen items, it was the arrogance, the entitlement, the way her sister spoke as if Alma's hard work belonged to her. Alma felt her chest tighten, anger and hurt mixing inside her. The room looked like a stranger's space now, stripped of everything that held her memories and dreams. Efua took another sip of soda, unbothered, her eyes daring Alma to protest. In that moment, Alma realized this was not only about stolen things, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Alma's hands shook as she faced her sister. Her heart was beating so fast she could almost hear it in her ears. She wanted to believe there had been some mistake, maybe even a prank, but the look on Efua's face killed that hope. With a little tilt of her head and a smirk tugging at her lips, Efua spoke in a tone that was both sharp and careless. "You're not even using those things anyway," she said, rolling her eyes as if Alma was the unreasonable one. "I needed money for my trip to Accra. Mom said you'd understand." The words hit Alma harder than a slap. She felt as if the air had been sucked out of her chest. This wasn't just theft, it was betrayal dressed up as logic. Efua spoke as if Alma's sacrifices, her savings, her treasures, were nothing more than spare change lying around for her to pick up. That necklace from their grandmother, which Alma had guarded like a piece of her heart, was dismissed with a wave of the hand, as if memories had no value. Alma's voice cracked as she whispered, "You sold everything? Even Nana's necklace?" But Efua just shrugged, sipping her soda without a care in the world. The casualness of it stung more than the words. It wasn't desperation that had driven her sister, it was entitlement, pure and simple. Alma thought back to all the nights she had stayed up tutoring children in the neighborhood, the long hours at the cafe where she saved every sadi, the times she denied herself small pleasures because she was determined to build something better. And now, with one selfish act, Efua had swept it all away, like brushing crumbs off a table. Her sister's smirk deepened as if she enjoyed watching Alma struggle to hold back her tears. "Don't look at me like that," Efua added lazily. "I'll pay you back, someday." The word, someday, hung in the air, heavy with mockery. There was no plan to repay, no regret. It was a performance, and Alma was supposed to play the forgiving sister once again. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in as Alma realized her family's idea of love had always been twisted. She was the one who worked hard, who sacrificed, who tried to lift everyone, but in return, they saw her not as a person with dreams but as a resource to be used. Her sister's cruel explanation was not just about a trip to Accra. It was a mirror showing Alma the truth: her family believed her effort and future belonged to them. Alma swallowed hard, fighting back the hot tears pressing at her eyes. She wanted to scream, to shake her sister, to demand her life back. But all she could do was stand there, frozen, listening to Efua's careless laughter. The sound echoed in her chest, hollow and sharp, sealing a wound Alma knew would not heal easily. Alma stormed out of the room, her chest heavy, her eyes burning. She ran straight to her parents, certain they would set things right. After all, this was theft, betrayal, and a wound too deep for silence. She burst into the living room, her voice shaking as she explained everything: her clothes, her laptop, her savings, even the necklace from her grandmother. Every word felt like blood pouring out of her, raw and desperate. She expected shock, maybe anger toward Efua. But instead, her father barely looked up from his chair. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he said, "She's your sister. Family comes first." The words hit Alma like a heavy stone in her chest. She blinked in disbelief, waiting for her mother to defend her, to at least acknowledge her pain. But her mother sighed, not with sympathy but with irritation, and said, "Be grateful she didn't take more. You can always buy another laptop. But you cannot buy another sister." Alma felt the ground shift under her feet. Her lips trembled, but no words came. How could they not see? This wasn't about a gadget or some clothes. This was about trust, respect, love, the kind of things a family was supposed to protect. Instead, they stood united, not with her, but against her, excusing the one who had robbed her. The room felt colder, as though the air itself had turned against her. Her father's face was unreadable, his eyes glued to the television as if Alma's pain was background noise. Her mother adjusted her wrapper and went back to slicing vegetables, acting as if Alma's world hadn't just been torn apart. The casualness of it all broke her more than the theft. It was as if her dreams, her sacrifices, her hard work had no meaning in their eyes. Memories flooded her mind, nights when she stayed awake tutoring children just to save enough for school, mornings when she left the cafe after long shifts with aching feet but a proud smile because she had managed to put something aside. She had believed her family would be proud too, that they would see her effort and honor it. But now, it was clear. They saw her not as their daughter or sister, but as their safety net, their backup plan, their endless well to draw from. Her voice finally broke through, soft but sharp. "So everything I work for is for her to waste?" she asked. But no one answered. Her mother shrugged, her father flipped the TV channel, and Efua's laughter echoed faintly from down the hall. Alma's heart sank deeper than ever. At that moment, she understood the truth. The real pain wasn't losing her possessions, it was realizing her family believed they owned her future. They didn't just betray her once, they had been betraying her for years, hiding it behind the word family. And for the first time in her life, Alma felt truly alone inside her own home. That night Alma sat alone on the bare mattress that was left behind, the walls around her echoing with emptiness. The room that once carried her laughter, her secrets, and her dreams now looked like a stranger's space. She buried her face in her hands and cried, but it was not the cry of weakness. It was the cry of someone who had finally seen the truth with painful clarity. Each tear carried years of silent sacrifice that no one had ever noticed, let alone appreciated. She thought of the afternoons she had spent tutoring the neighbors' children, smiling through her exhaustion because the little money she earned meant one more step closer to her goals. She remembered the long nights at the cafe, serving customers until her back ached, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, but still holding on to hope because she was saving for something better. Every sadie she tucked away was a promise to herself, a promise of a future built by her own hands. Now, in just one selfish swoop, her family had taken it all and treated her years of effort like loose change. That laptop was not just a gadget, it held her notes, her school projects, her future. That savings box was not just coins and notes, it was her blood and sweat stacked up one by one. And her grandmother's necklace was not just jewelry, it was love, memory, and a bond to the woman who once believed Alma could become more than her circumstances. Alma felt her chest tighten as she thought about the cruel words of her parents. Family comes first. Be grateful she didn't take more. Those words replayed in her mind like a curse. For them, family meant her giving and them taking. For them, love meant sacrifice from her side and silence from theirs. She had been blind to it for years, believing that if she worked hard enough, if she sacrificed enough, one day they would value her. But that night, sitting on the cold mattress, Alma understood, her family never saw her sacrifices as love. They saw them as their right. She wiped her tears, but more came, hot and angry. She wasn't crying because she was broken. She was crying because she was done. Something inside her cracked, but instead of shattering, it reshaped into something stronger. The betrayal that once felt like a knife in her back now became a fire in her chest. Alma whispered into the empty room, her voice trembling but firm, "Never again." It was not just a promise to herself, it was a vow. She had carried her family's weight for too long, giving them everything while they gave her nothing but dismissal. That night was her breaking point, but also her beginning. From that bare mattress, with nothing left to lose, Alma decided she would no longer live for people who saw her dreams as disposable. She would rise, not for them, but for herself. Alma woke up the next morning with swollen eyes, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had cried all night, but when the tears dried, what was left behind was a quiet determination. She knew begging her parents or arguing with Efua was useless. They had already shown her where they stood. If she wanted justice, she would have to take it into her own hands. So instead of shouting or pleading, Alma picked up a pen and a small notebook. She began to write everything down. She started with the money she had saved. Every bank slip she had collected over the past months, every deposit she had carefully made, she brought them out and placed them neatly on her bed. She flipped through her old receipts until she found the one for her laptop, the device she had worked endless nights to afford. She smoothed the paper with her hand, her chest tightening at the memory of how proud she had been the day she bought it. Then she pulled out her phone and searched for old photos. There it was, a picture of her grandmother's necklace shining against her palm. She saved it carefully, like a piece of evidence for a case only she would fight. Slowly, her room began to look less like an empty shell and more like a small office of truth. Every piece of paper, every photograph, every small detail became part of her quiet plan. This was not just about proving Efua had stolen from her. It was about showing everyone who had dismissed her that she was not weak, not disposable, and not someone to be taken for granted. Alma sat back and looked at the growing pile of documents. A small, tired smile touched her lips. She wasn't gathering these for the police, though she knew she could. No, she had something far better in mind. The police might punish Efua, but Alma wasn't looking for punishment, she was looking for a lesson. A lesson that would sting harder than any jail cell, a lesson that would expose the truth for everyone to see. She thought about Sunday lunch, the one time of the week when all her relatives gathered. They would sit around the big table, laughing, gossiping, pretending everything was perfect. That would be the perfect place to reveal her plan. Efua would not be able to hide behind their parents' excuses, and her relatives would finally see what Alma had endured. The thought gave her strength. For the first time since the theft, she didn't feel powerless. She felt like she was holding the strings, slowly and carefully weaving them into a net that would catch her sister's lies. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't slam any doors, she didn't beg for fairness. Instead, Alma worked in silence, her hands steady, her heart firm. She was preparing not just for herself, but for the moment everyone would finally see her worth. Sunday finally came, and as always, the house was full of noise. Aunties were gossiping in the kitchen, uncles were laughing over old stories, and cousins ran around with plates of food. The smell of jollof rice and fried chicken filled the air, but Alma barely tasted any of it. She sat quietly at the edge of the table, her heart steady, her mind focused. She had waited all week for this moment. While her family laughed and ate, she reached into her bag and pulled out a neatly folded document. Her fingers brushed over the paper one last time before she placed it right in the center of the table. Efua noticed it first. She smirked, leaning back in her chair with her soda in hand. "What's this?" she asked loudly, her tone dripping with mockery. "An apology note?" She chuckled and even winked at one of the cousins, certain Alma was about to embarrass herself. But when Alma's uncle, curious, reached over and unfolded the paper, the room grew silent. His eyes scanned the page, and the laughter around the table died out. He muttered under his breath. "This is an invoice." Everyone leaned in closer, their plates forgotten. Line by line, the document listed every single item Efua had taken, the laptop with its brand and model, the exact amount of cash from Alma's savings, the market price of her clothes, and even the necklace from their late grandmother, carefully priced with a jeweler's note. At the bottom, in bold letters, it was addressed directly to Efua, with the total amount written clearly. Alma's voice was calm, steady, almost too calm for the storm brewing inside her. She looked straight at her sister and said, "Since you like shopping with my life, you can also learn about paying for it." The words cut through the silence sharper than a knife. Efua's smirk disappeared instantly. Her eyes darted across the table, hoping someone would laugh or dismiss it as a joke. But no one did. The aunts who once praised her charm now shook their heads. The cousins whispered under their breath. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier dismissal now exposed in front of everyone. Even her mother, who had told Alma to be grateful, looked away, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. Efua tried to speak, her voice shaky. "This is ridiculous. She's overreacting," but Alma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The invoice spoke louder than any argument. It was proof, written in black and white, that Alma's pain was not imagination, not exaggeration, but cold, hard truth. The weight of silence pressed down on Efua, and for the first time, she looked small, cornered, and ashamed. Alma sat back in her chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She had not shouted, she had not begged. She had simply delivered the truth, and the truth had done what her words alone never could. Efua's smile vanished the moment the murmurs started. At first, it was soft whispers from the cousins at the far end of the table, then side glances from the aunties, and finally sharp coughs from the uncles who usually ignored family drama. The air grew heavy, and the warm laughter that had filled the room earlier now turned into judgmental silence. Every pair of eyes locked on Efua, and for the first time, she could not hide behind her charm or her soda bottle. The same relatives who once called her the sweet, carefree one, were now staring at her with disgust. Her cheeks flushed red, and her hands trembled slightly as she tried to refold the invoice, as if making it disappear could erase the truth. Her father cleared his throat loudly, trying to restore control. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm but uneasy. "This is a family matter. We don't need to make a scene in front of everyone." He reached toward the paper as if snatching it away would silence the growing shame. But before he could touch it, Alma's calm voice stopped him in his tracks. "If this isn't settled in 30 days, Alma said, her eyes steady on Efua, "I'll be filing this with small claims court." The room froze. The statement landed heavier than the invoice itself. It wasn't just a sister's threat, it was a declaration that Alma was no longer playing by their rules. She was taking control, not with anger, not with begging, but with the law and her own voice. The cousins gasped, the aunties nodded in agreement, and even the uncles who usually sided with her father leaned back in their chairs, impressed. Efua's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around the table, expecting rescue, but none came. Her mother avoided her gaze, her father's lips pressed into a tight line, and the relatives who once excused her now whispered about how selfish she had been. The same family that had laughed at Alma's pain now sat in silent judgment of Efua. Alma didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't even smile. She simply sat straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her presence commanding more respect than ever before. For the first time, Efua was the one shrinking in her chair, while Alma held the power without lifting a finger. The balance in the room had shifted completely. Alma was no longer the quiet, obedient sister who tolerated injustice. She was the woman who stood her ground with grace and proof. The silence in the room was not just shame for Efua, it was respect for Alma. In that single moment, everyone saw her differently. She was not just the hard-working daughter they had overlooked. She was someone who could no longer be ignored. And Efua, stripped of her smugness, could only sit there as the walls of family support crumbled around her. By the next morning, word of the Sunday lunch showdown had already spread beyond the family walls. Neighbors whispered about it at the market, calling it the Invoice showdown. Some laughed at Efua's audacity, joking that she had tried to live like a queen on her sister's sweat. Others spoke with admiration, saying Amma had done what many people only dream of, standing up to family when no one else would. The story traveled quickly through Kumasi, from street corners to classrooms, from food vendors to taxi drivers. Everywhere, people repeated Amma's line, "Since you like shopping with my life, you can also learn about paying for it." It became a kind of anthem, a phrase people used whenever they saw injustice. Inside her home, things were quieter than they had ever been. Efua avoided eye contact, her smugness gone, and her parents, who once dismissed Amma, now looked at her with a mix of unease and respect. They knew the power dynamic had shifted, and Amma was no longer the one they could silence with casual words. Amma herself felt different too. What she had lost in clothes, money, and even her precious necklace, she had gained in something far more valuable, self-respect and control. For the first time in her life, she was not weighed down by their shadows. She no longer begged for fairness or love that came with conditions. As she rose from the table that day, Amma did not just walk away from her family's betrayal. She walked into her own power. Every step out of that room was a step into freedom, a step into a future where she would never again let anyone treat her dreams like loose change.